One of the questions I have been asked the most since starting my YouTube channel a few months ago is how did I make my sourdough starter? So today I want to journey with you from start to finish on how to make a sourdough starter at home from scratch. Now for full disclosure, I've actually never made a homemade sourdough starter before, so this will be a journey for us to do together. This starter that you've seen me use a lot, I actually bought a 1 ounce pack of dried starter from a woman locally who owns a micro bakery. And then I used that to get my starter going. And over the years, I was gifted starters, so I have a lot of experience of maintaining a healthy, active starter. Making sourdough starter is really a minimalist dream come true because you don't need that much stuff, and most of what you need you probably already have. So first and foremost, of course, you will need flour. I'm using whole wheat and all-purpose flour. There are a lot of theories out there about what is the best flour to use, but whole wheat and rye are good to get things going and to boost your starter later because they contain more microorganisms that are conducive to creating sourdough starter. But let's get the starter going first. So in addition to flour, you will also need water and a clean jar. On the morning of day one, grab your kitchen scale, and I really want to emphasize how helpful it is to actually weigh your ingredients, not measure them. So weighing them in grams versus measuring them in volume is much more precise and will yield a more consistent result, especially as you're just getting going with understanding sourdough starter. Place your jar on the scale and be sure to tare your scale or zero it out so you're getting an accurate measurement. And then weigh out 113 grams of whole wheat flour. You will see recipes for this online that use more or less, but this is approximately 1 cup, so this is sort of an easy measurement for me to keep track of. You'll use an equal ratio of flour and water. So if you measured 113 grams of flour, then it's time to measure 113 grams of water. Now, I like to measure my water separately. I just happen to get a little heavy-handed with the water sometimes. So you could definitely tare your scale and pour the water right in, but I tend to overwater my starter sometimes. You can pick your path to 113 grams of water. However you get there is fine, but then pour your 113 grams of water into the 113 grams of flour and give it a really good stir. The consistency I'm aiming for here is the thick pancake batter. It's a little hard to tell in the beginning, especially with whole wheat flour, but you can see here it's a pretty thick batter-like consistency. There is a lot of passionate controversy in the sourdough starter world about whether or not it is okay to use cloth to cover your jar. In my experience, it has not been a problem at all. So here I am just cutting out a square of clean 100% cotton, and then I'll put it on top of the jar and secure it with a rubber band. What's most important is that you don't use any lid that seals tightly because you need room for your starter to be able to expand. And if it can't do that, eventually it could shatter the glass. Your starter can now sit on the counter for 24 hours. The room will need to be 70 degrees or warmer. If it's not, that can actually slow the process down. So if it is drafty or cold in your house, I would put it in the microwave or the oven with the light on, for example. Just don't forget that it's in there, out of sight, out of mind. So leave a note on the door if you need to, or even a bread proofing box to make sure it stays at 70 degrees or higher. It's the morning of day 2 and there's not a lot of activity in this starter yet, which is fine. You may or may not see bubbles after the first 24 hours. So now we have to discard half of this and then repeat the exact same steps as yesterday. There is a lot of mystery surrounding sourdough discard, and I will talk about that in just a few minutes. But here I am taking out 113 grams of starter from the jar. Then it's the exact same process as the day before. Add in 113 grams of flour. You can see I'm spilling it everywhere here. So 113 grams of flour in your jar and 113 grams of water and mix it together. So you can see it's a 1:1:1 ratio here. You take out 113 grams, you put in 113 grams of flour, and then you put in 113 grams of water. It's not really necessary to put your starter in a clean jar every single time, at least in my experience, but the dried whole wheat flour that was on the edge of the jar from the day before actually cut my hand. So I decided at this point I was going to start switching to a clean jar just to avoid any more sourdough starter casualties. And then this sits on the counter again for 24 hours.
Good morning. It is the morning of day 3. I just woke up. My family's still asleep, so I'm being a little quiet, but I went to go grab my coffee mug and look what I found. a doubled sourdough starter. So overnight, this doubled, and I'm really excited about it. It is alive.
What I want to emphasize here is that as exciting as this first doubling is on day 2 or day 3, this does not indicate that it is time to bake. It indicates that it is filled with bacteria that we don't really want to eat. So that's why we throw away the discard in these early days of getting our starter established. All right, I'm dressed and ready to go. And now it is time to move on with the day 3 feedings. So now we begin 2 feedings daily about every 12 hours. And from this point on, I'm going to switch to all-purpose flour. I'm going to interrupt myself for a minute at this point so you can learn from my mistakes. I switched to all-purpose flour for my AM and my PM feedings from this point forward up until day 7 because I was not getting great results from the all-purpose flour. So I started feeding it whole wheat. So to save yourself the hassle and the headache, at this point, when you do your twice daily feedings, I would use half all-purpose and either half whole wheat or half rye. Really, any combination thereof is fine, but I think you do need the whole wheat or the rye to really keep things going along. Days 3 through 7 are the same thing. Feed in the morning, 12 hours later, feed in the evening. And don't forget to discard each time before you feed them. So theoretically, you should take out, if you're using the same measurement as I am, 113 grams of the starter and then throw away the remainder. But here is a little glimmer of hope. I actually mismeasured this for a number of days and didn't realize I had mismeasured, and it still worked completely fine. You will hear people all over the internet talk about how much you should discard, how much you should feed, what the hydration should be. It is going to be okay. And I think if we overthink this too much, it takes the joy out of it and it gets too confusing and too complicated. So discard half, feed it 113 grams of flour, feed it 113 grams of water, and have a good time. And speaking of discard, I want to just demystify this a little bit while we roll through some sped up footage of me feeding for a couple of days. So the reason that we discard sourdough is because the amount increases exponentially. It's a 1:1:1 ratio. 1 part starter, 1 part flour, 1 part water. If you don't discard, you would have to double your ingredients to meet the 1:1:1 ratio. And then again, the next day, you'd have to double again. So it's actually quadruple from where it was the first day. Good morning. It is day 5. My starter is alive and well. I am not. I have a cold, but we are going to make it through the starter building process. So you can see, it might be a little hard to see, but I am starting to get a little bit of rise in my starter, not just bubbles on top anymore, but it is not doubling yet. So for some people, 5 days might be enough. For others, maybe not. It really depends on your environment, the temperature, the humidity, the type of flour you're using. So you might be ready to use your starter at this point. I am not. So until this doubles, we will continue the twice daily feedings. I'm in a number of sourdough Facebook groups, and I encourage you to go onto Facebook and look at some of those groups because you can learn a lot from other people in there. But one of the questions I see the most come up from beginners is, am I supposed to feed the discard? No, you could. If you feed the discard, what you end up with is a second set of starter. But discard is just that. It's something you're getting rid of. So in the beginning, when you're establishing your starter, you throw it away because it's not really great to eat. Once your starter is established, you can save it and then make really wonderful things with it. I've shared a number of sourdough discard recipes in my YouTube videos, so I will drop those in some links in the description box below. Good morning. It has officially been 7 days, 1 week since I started my sourdough starter. Things are looking pretty good. So you can see the black line here. This is where the starter was last night when I fed it, and it has risen to here. So it's not quite double. So what I want to do today is I'm going to feed it some whole wheat flour and see if that kicks things off and gets things moving a little bit faster. The other thing I want to note is the smell of your starter. So when you are getting your starter established, you will probably notice that it smells a little bad. Some people describe it as like gym socks. I think it smells like Parmesan cheese. And when Parmesan cheese smells like Parmesan cheese, it smells good. When other things smell like Parmesan cheese, it kind of smells bad. So if that is happening, that is normal. Keep discarding, keep feeding your starter. And as the bacteria and the yeast kind of begin to change and evolve in your starter, that will go away. And eventually it should really smell like sourdough. Good morning. So it is day 8. I had a stress dream about my sourdough starter last night, and I woke up really early this morning worried that I forgot to feed it before I went to bed. I did not forget to feed it. But these are the things that start to go through your mind when you're trying to make a sourdough starter, because it is sort of a delicate situation. So all is well. Feeding it the whole wheat 2 times yesterday in the morning and the evening really seemed to work. So this is actually deflating. When I picked it up, I was watching some of the bubbles pop and it was going down. So it reached a peak. I don't know if it's quite double at this point. We'll see today. It's a little easier, of course, for me to keep an eye on during the day than overnight. So we'll see how it goes. But so far, so good. And I think we are getting close to having a usable sourdough starter. And it worked. 2 hours after my evening feeding, here is my doubled sourdough starter, and it's been doing great since then. It is day 10 of establishing our scratch-made sourdough starter, and I have a helper here today. Her job is to make sure my hair stays out of my face while I make sourdough starter. But things are looking really good. So it is about doubled. So at this point, I am feeling pretty good about just maintaining it for a few more days to nurture it and then start baking with it. I found for sure that adding the whole wheat flour on day 8 really gave things a boost. And in my sourdough starter experience with the ones that I have, that friends have given me, or the one that I made with some dried starter, that half all purpose and half whole wheat flour is enough to keep things going. So I am going to keep doing that with this starter. Soon I'll be posting more videos about how to care for your starter, bake with your starter, and more. Be sure to hit subscribe to stay in the know about those upcoming videos. And if you have questions or comments about sourdough starter or your sourdough journey, leave them in the comments below and we can start building this knowledge base together. Thank you so much for tuning into Moon and Magnolia's YouTube channel, where we elevate the everyday from scratch and at home, and I'll see you again next time.